In the latest developments in the ongoing Hamas-Israel conflict, the world is urging a ceasefire. But Israel says that the Gaza war has entered a new stage with an expanded ground operation. The bombardment has knocked out most communications in Gaza, and this largely cut off the besieged enclave's 2.3 million people from the world, while enabling the Israeli military to control the narrative in a new stage of fighting. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights warns that there is potential for thousands of more civilians to die as Israel presses a ground operation in Gaza. Israel is rejecting calls for respite in Gaza as its closest allies in the West have around the idea of humanitarian pauses or temporary stops to the bombardment. Growing international distress at the conditions for 2.3 million people trapped under the heaviest airstrikes Israel has ever unleashed on the Mediterranean enclave led major powers this week to call on Israel to allow such pauses to get aid in and Israeli hostages held by militant group Hamas out.
Life-saving humanitarian aid, food, water, medicine, fuel must be allowed to reach all civilians swiftly, safely, and at scale. The Secretary General welcomes the growing global consensus for a humanitarian pause in the conflict, and he repeats his call for a humanitarian ceasefire, the unconditional release of all hostages, and the delivery of life-saving supplies at the scale needed.
Now, the issue has opened the first public split between Israel and backers, including the United States, the EU, UK, and other G7 members, such as Japan, over the campaign after tight alignment and support in nearly 3 weeks since Hamas militants burst from Gaza into the southern Israel on a deadly rampage. EU leaders have also called for pauses in Israeli bombing and Hamas rocket attacks to get humanitarian aid into Gaza in a declaration agreed at a summit in Brussels. The leaders of the Union's 27 nations expressed the gravest concern for the deteriorating humanitarian situation in Gaza.
We need a decisive relaunch of negotiations for a two-state solution. We need to demonstrate that it meets Palestinian aspirations and also strengthens Israel's security. And we must continue to work with our American partners and all our partners in the region.
Leaders emphasized that the siege must stop and that it is of utmost importance that the Palestinian people and the hostages and all those who are in Gaza have access to humanitarian aid. There is no contradiction between showing solidarity to Israel and, of course, acting on the need of humanitarian aid for the people of Gaza.
Now, the chorus of appeals for a pause followed days of intense diplomacy at UN headquarters in New York and in Brussels, and was a compromise between those such as Spain, who wanted to push Israel to call a ceasefire, and those who say Israel's right to self-defense was foremost.